Right, good morning everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on how to harness the full power of Microsoft Lync using Gamma SIP trunks. Could be any SIP trunks, but this is our game, so our rules. We're going to be taking some questions, but I'd ask you to do those by chat, please. There is a chat facility on your GoToWebinar screen. If you look down the bottom, there should be an option there. Ask questions anytime during the webinar, and we'll get around to them at the end. So, good attendance this morning. Lots of people on the call, but I would say that, wouldn't I? But I'm being genuine. We've got some customers, so hi to you guys. Some I know, some I don't. But mostly this morning we've got prospects, so soon-to-be customers. Thanks to all you guys for joining us. I'm not going to bore you this morning on who Gamma are. I'm just going to say we're pleased to see you here and to say that we are the #1 provider of SIP in the UK, so we can speak with some authority about the subject we're going to be talking about this morning. We've also got a number of competitors on the call. Hi to you guys, you know who you are. Take it as a huge compliment that you're here joining us today. This morning, the format is going to be interview style. We think this works best with these types of events. And I've got product manager Stephen Ashley Bryan with me. Hi, Stephen.
Hello, Jamie.
I'm going to make the assumption that everyone here knows a little bit about Lync. You've certainly got a reasonable grasp of what it does, and we're going to get cracking straight away and start with our first question, which is Lync's already got voice, hasn't it, Steve?
Yeah.
Why do I need SIP trunks?
Right. Okay. So you're absolutely right. I mean, as a unified communications platform, audio is an important part of that. However, yeah. I think a lot of people their implementation of Microsoft Lync certainly initially is basically on campus. Okay, it's been an internal event, and without voice, without SIP trunks, that's where it would stay in the main. It would be just an on-net application. So SIP trunks, if you like, take it out of the enterprise, allow you to make and receive telephone calls.
Yeah.
Outside of your organisation, and that's I guess one of the key reasons why SIP trunks will play a valuable sort of part in any Lync deployment. The other thing is that a lot of organisations would already be duplicating that effort. They already have voice systems, and Lync clearly can take over some of that role. So having SIP trunks just reduces that duplication of effort.
Yeah, so I suppose what Microsoft is saying about it is it's a unified comms platform. What's unified about having a comms platform that you then have to have another system to reach the outside world? Okay. So why then do I have to use SIP? Why can I not just use my standard ISDN?
It is possible to use standard ISDN, but I mean we provide SIP to all sorts of organisations, large and small. ISDN is only going one way. It's disappearing. You're losing 300,000 channels of ISDN a year. It's just disappearing. Then be converted into, in the main, SIP. So it's not specifically a Microsoft rationale for moving to SIP, but clearly, if you've got, if you've bought yourself a nice new spanking sort of Lync platform, plumbing it into ISDN is really a retrograde step. It gives you, it's the catalyst, it's the opportunity, I think, then to move and keep that IP telephony going out onto the PSDN. I mean, Microsoft didn't develop Lync to use TDM. I mean, clearly it's an IP product. Getting to the border of your company, the front door, and then turning it back into TDM, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And it's also, I think, I'm going to be fairly blunt here, it's inevitable. Everybody will be using SIP trunks at some point in the future because, as I said, ISDN, the Ofcom reports themselves reveal that it's just disappearing. So you might as well take this opportunity to connect it now if you have Lync.
Okay, good answer. So I've got Lync. How does it all piece together? I've got Lync. I buy SIP. How do I put it all together?
So the the nice thing about Microsoft Lync is it does have a number of ways, a number of building blocks, a number of ways to be put together, depending on what you want to do and how the organization sort of deploys itself, either single site, multi-site. So there are things called edge servers that allow various deployments of Lync to work in a federated manner. And what we talk to, I think importantly, what we talk to from a SIP trunking perspective, what we see connect to is what's called the mediation server. This, if you like, is the communications conduit for an organization. They connect their link into that mediation server. They may even connect existing PBXs in there if they're going through a transition stage before it all becomes fully sort of a link for everything. So we can talk to the mediation server directly, and I think we'll talk about that in a moment in terms of compatibility, because it's not straightforward unless you've gone through a particular process, which we have. You could also put in something called a session border controller as well between us and the mediation server. And for some people that makes a lot of sense, and we can talk about SBCs as well. So we can do it in a number of ways, depending on how that organization wants to present itself to the world. Okay, so either natively or via some kind of gateway.
So do I need to get rid of my PBX then? Do I need to get rid of my phone?
You know what? That's a really leading question, because depending who you are, I think Microsoft might say, well, yeah, absolutely. Why do you continue to need a PBX? The more conservative folks out there would probably want to run them in parallel for a period of time. But ultimately, if you don't get rid of your PBX, I mean, Lync is developed as a unified communications platform. And making CV telephone calls not only internally but externally is part and parcel of that. And if you're not using it, you literally are duplicating effort, time, money, operational expense, and so forth. So the blunt answer is no, you don't need your PBX. Okay, but are you going to keep it for a period of time? Some people will, but eventually it'll disappear.
Okay, so I get rid of my PBX. What devices can I use then to make calls? Because not everyone wants to use a soft client on their desktop or on their laptop.
Okay.
How do I make calls?
Okay, and there are handsets that are approved, compatible with Lync, and the numbers and types increase fairly frequently as well. So I don't think the reason not to go fully Lync for your voice is anything really to do with the handsets, because they exist, and why wouldn't they exist? So that's really a sort of a non-issue.
Okay. We had a question asking someone asking, does it connect natively or via SBC? You touched on.
Yeah. So what we've done. I mean, this is really to do with compatibility as well. We went through a process, and Microsoft's quite keen for vendors, both of equipment and service providers, to go through what they call the Unified Communications Open Interoperability Program, the UCOP, if you like. And what that process does, it polices the quality, if you like, and the compatibility of anything connecting to Microsoft Lync. Okay, so in our case, what we did is we worked through an independent third party to go through a test suite against the Microsoft sort of pro forma of requirements, and we spent time and money and go through this process, and at the end of it, you basically get a tick in a box. Microsoft say, guess what? Yeah, you guys are compatible. Your SIP trunks work with Microsoft Lync, and what that means is that we can connect natively to Lync. For us, you know what? There are some nuances with connecting to Lync. We use particularly TCP as opposed to UDP to connect to it. But all of the functionality and the features that we offer on our SIP trunks, from a network perspective, are identical to a Lync deployment as it would be to any other PBX.
So what's the difference then? You mentioned TCP and UDP. What's the difference between those two?
It's just a transport mechanism. Okay. That people in the networking world will appreciate and know the difference.
Okay.
So we support both. Okay. Microsoft prefer TCP, and that's why we build our SIP trunks to Lync in the TCP way. The other way of connecting, as I mentioned before, is via either a gateway or an SBC. Now, an SBC is a device that people will generally deploy for security purposes.
Okay.
So they want to divorce completely the user side, the topology and the servers and everything going on the user side from the network. So an SBC is technically it's a thing called a back-to-back user agent. A call comes into an SBC, it basically gets stopped and started again before it hits link. So they're completely divorced entities. So there's a relationship with it. It's like a firewall on steroids. They're also the SBCs do other things as well. They do things like transcoding. They make sense from a licensing perspective as well. They take processing power away from other entities that would otherwise be sort of drawn into that. So, but generally speaking, it's from a security perspective. And when we're talking to an SBC, and we've been connecting to Microsoft Lync behind SBCs for quite a long time now, because our SIP is talking to the SBC in that sense,
yeah.
not talking to the Lync server.
Yeah.
Okay? The interoperability program allows us to talk directly to the Lync server, to the mediation server, if the customer wants us to, and that's really the key difference.
I see. You mentioned licensing there. I just touched on that. Do I need any additional licensing? Well,
I mean, Microsoft's licensing matrix, if you will, in terms of CALs and so forth, will indicate that I think pretty well the standard enterprise license certainly will allow you to. You don't have to do anything else. You've got the capacity to route calls back and forth to the PSTN, to the outside world, with the type of licensing that most people already have.
And do most SIP providers then, do they have compatibility with Microsoft Lync, or is it unusual?
It's certainly in the UK. It's quite unusual because I think partly because you've got to have an anticipation that Microsoft Lync will be important in the marketplace, and you've also got to make the investment to go through the whole process. It's an untrivial exercise to get through this method. So very few SIP trunking providers actually bother to do it. I suspect maybe in a few years' time you'll see a lot more as Microsoft Lync becomes more widespread. But we think it's important enough now to have made the investment now. So yeah, I like to think we're fairly unique.
And you mentioned security. I guess this is going to be a key issue.
Microsoft are very keen on security. I think they like to certainly offer security within the product, clearly. And what we've decided from a network perspective to extend that out to the PSTN. So I think in the new year we're going to add something called TLS, which stands for Transport Layer Security. Now this is a mechanism whereby we encrypt the signaling packets, from Microsoft to the edge of the PSTN. And what that means is that anybody trying to hack in, they won't be able to associate any media with specific calls and so forth. And TLS is a fairly standard mechanism deployed. So it's business as usual, for people in the security sort of arena.
Okay, we got to ask a question. We've been asked this a couple of times. What about SRTP? And
SRTP is I put it down as a possibly a nice to have. I'm not convinced as a product manager there's enough demand for it currently. SRTP stands for Secure Real-Time Protocol. Now, real-time protocol is where we carry the media, the actual voice call itself.
Right.
And you can encrypt that using the thing called SRTP. And it requires, complementary technology at both ends, our end and the SBC or the Lync end. If we saw, as a product manager, we make decisions on what we want to do and what we think is valuable and so forth. Right now, the jury's out on whether we want to introduce SRTP. If it turns out we need to, then it's not a huge ask for us to do that. But currently, TLS will be the first thing out of the bag.
Okay. Can it be hacked? And when I say can it be hacked, I'm saying this is a big thing right now. PBX hacking.
Yeah.
Down the line. Is this going to be a problem with?
I don't think it's not going to be any more of a problem than anything else. Now, VoIP hacking, there's some frightening statistics because reliable data is very hard to find. 20 billion is the estimated figure worldwide for fraud on VoIP systems, IP telephony systems. So with the thing about fraud is, well, the nice thing about telephony fraud is it's relatively easy to stop. And what I mean by that is that people who get hacked into are generally those who don't do sort of the most common, don't fulfill the most common security requirements, shutting and locking the door. They don't change the password, the default passwords and so forth. If you configure with an SPC and so forth, and you do, the PBX or the link systems and so forth are part and parcel of security policy, no real big deal. It's not to say, and I would never say this, you're immune from hacking, because there are some awfully clever people out there, okay, and they ultimately, could potentially get into a system. The deal with VoIP is you can rack up a bill fairly quickly. Okay, you can rack up calls very quickly. So we have a service, fraud management service, okay, that we provide that rather doesn't. We won't say you will never get hacked into. We simply limit the exposure. So most endpoints, most SIP trunking endpoints, okay, most customers know what their telephone bill should look like. They sort of know, certainly over a week and maybe even over a 24-hour period, what their typical spend would be. So what we can do is we can, within our system, say, well, if your spend is £50 a day or whatever, okay, if it gets beyond that, or if it gets close to that, we can let you know. If it gets, and if it reaches that, if we want to, we can actually stop calls.
So am I managing that myself, or are you doing that for me?
Well, we would, in cooperation with you, because it's your limit. You need to know what it is you're setting up, but we set it up on our systems for you. So, but it's the deal about it, and these types of things, is that guess what? People generally don't hack into PBX and commit fraud at sort of 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's generally fairly late at night or early in the morning, and that's why it has to be an automated process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will people be able to hear my calls? Are you going to be able to listen to what I'm saying?
You know what? If you made a huge effort and you hacked into either the PBX and the link systems itself or even part of the network, potentially you could try and grab some packets. But if you're encrypting the signaling, it's going to be virtually impossible to associate those with a particular call. Because we're not talking about the old time division multiplexing. You knew that time slot would always contain the same content for that particular call. Okay. Yeah. With packets, you don't see that. They're just a whole flood of packets. And if you can't associate packets with individual call flows, then you can't build up. The jigsaw's completely sort of.
You end up with what you get.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. And how does that compare with ISDN?
Well, as I said with ISDN, if you have a predetermined time slot, it will always be that same telephone conversation until it's over. And physically, putting a tap on a piece of copper just to do that is probably not as relatively easy compared to trying to do sort of using a packet sniffer and so forth.
So what you're saying is actually, if you've got ISDN already, if you switch to SIP, the risk is certainly no greater.
You've got the tools, okay. With SIP, you've got the tools to mitigate, okay, the security risk, I think.
And just briefly, firewall issues. Am I going to have to be opening a whole load of ports here? Is there going to be an issue there?
No, in the same way. I mean, if you think about a firewall, the firewall is designed. It's not a brick wall. It's designed to let traffic through. Okay, it's designed to let traffic through in a secure way. Okay, so it understands what's going on. VoIP is just another protocol that requires another port, okay, to be configured on the firewall to pass through. Okay, so you've got ports for the signaling. Actually, port 56 is the general one, and you've got ports for the media. Okay, so a firewall, if you make sure you have a VoIP-aware firewall, towards an application of a gateway as well. So you either use a VoIP-aware firewall or use an SBC. Okay, and either one of those, you configure properly, okay, to associate the right ports with VoIP. Okay, and it's like business as usual. It's any other media stream that you're managing. So yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
You don't turn the firewall off because you're using VoIP.
What about the price then? How much is this going to cost me?
Well, very few conversations would get very far if SIP was more expensive than ISDN.
Right. Yeah.
So I think it's a reasonable assumption to assume that the commercial position of SIP trunks. Certainly the rental for doing that is anywhere between 30-50% cheaper than ISDN. I mean, that's a given within our marketplace.
Huge saving then.
It is, and it's the reason why we've got over 100,000 sort of SIP channels deployed. It's almost a no-brainer from a why wouldn't you do it? From our perspective, it's always been the case that the best people who've got vested interest in using SIP, IP telephony, okay, because it's scalable. And from a telco, from our perspective, of course we want to use packets, to move stuff around it. That's the way we move everything. Okay, so there are, and those economies, those technology economies get transferred to the customer. Okay, for be a bit cheaper rentals. Okay, so the starting point is definitely SIP should be cheaper than an equivalent ISDN service. And remember that when people move from ISDN to SIP, one of the first things they do, and it might be the first time they've ever done it, is they do an audit. Okay. Yeah. So in my experience, somebody says, guess what? We want to transfer a lot of stuff over to SIP for these reasons. Obviously cost, but other reasons as well. But they do an audit and discover that in fact they might have had 50 or 100 channels. In actual fact, they only needed sort of 50% or 60% of those channels. They're totally underutilized. Yeah. So people are very often not replacing on a numeric like-for-like basis between ISDN and SIP. So that's the glib answer is, yeah, it's a lot cheaper, and you'll probably find you need less of it. But the reality is that you also need to consider the delivery of SIP. It's got to be delivered over something. Yeah. Okay, it's not going to be delivered over your old ISDN. It's delivered over a data path. Whether it's going to be some kind of broadband or more likely an Ethernet or a private wire. The challenge here is, and the thing to appreciate is that many organisations already have big chunks of bandwidth coming into their site. Okay? Yeah. So there's generally an access mechanism already in place, and like anybody else, we've got preferred access mechanisms and so forth. We deliver our own broadband. We call it assured and so forth, yeah, which is dedicated for voice. Okay. We don't mandate that you use a particular technology, but common sense and a conversation with us will, I think, quickly establish if what you have is appropriate, okay, for the purpose of delivering SIP trunks. Also, people would probably want to consider, in terms of equipment, whether they introduce an SBC or they upgrade the firewall, will make sure it's voice compatible and understands that. So, and the point is, obviously this works out for a lot of people. Otherwise, we wouldn't have so much SIP trunks being provided.
I know we've got a lot of universities on the call today. Could you tell us a little bit about Janet and what the work that we've done with Janet? Yeah.
So, very pertinent to universities and FE colleges and even local authorities. These are entities that have more often than not their access to the internet and peer-to-peer stuff as well, point-to-point stuff, via this academic network, the Joint Academic Network, which is it's a massive network. It's state-sponsored. You and I pay for it, I guess, ultimately. It's a 100 gig backbone. It really is a sort of tremendous network. Now, what we've done is we wanted to deliver SIP trunks into the academic community, as we would. A lot of these institutions have fat pipes. Particularly universities have fairly fat pipes from Janet. So we put in 2 peering connections into the Janet network, one up in Manchester and one in London. And these are 1 gig, they're called BGP connections. By doing that, we instantly can see, and the university can see our network. So all that we need to do is we can provision a SIP trunk through Janet to an endpoint onto university in exactly the same way we could through any other type of network. It becomes totally transparent to us. And we kicked that off about a year ago. We have this, we like to think it's a very unique relationship with Janet to do that. We have a good working relationship with them. They play, no real part in obviously the provisioning or the technical provisioning of SIP trunks. Okay, they just acknowledge that we, if you like, are the SIP trunking provider that use their network, to reach universities and so forth.
And are there any other ways that I can use SIP to save me a bit of money?
Yeah. We'll start off saying that trunking is a pretty neat thing to do because it's cheaper than ISDN. But actually, very quickly, once you sort of think about it, people look at SIP trunks because of a number of unique qualities that don't exist in ISDN really. One of them is the flexibility in terms of channels. If you buy ISDN now, the minimum number of channels you can buy things is 8.
Yeah.
Okay. And you get 8 to 30, and then you need the trunk. That's another minimum of 8.
Yeah.
If you want 31, you've got 38. You've got to have, and so forth. With SIP trunks, there really isn't a minimum. We generally sort of knock our minimum of at least 2 channels because put a call on divert or something. You probably want 2 channels to be able to do that. But there's no real minimum, and there's no real maximum either because remember, it's just capacity. It's just bandwidth capacity that we're talking about here. But the real neat thing is that because of the way we deploy this service and the technology we use, we can actually turn channels up and down literally within moments. So an organisation that will want perhaps 20 channels today and they suddenly need 50, the physical process of doing that, okay, assuming that clearly obviously they've got adequate bandwidth, the physical process of doing it takes about 30 seconds. I mean, it literally is it's a trivial exercise for us. Okay. Now, if you're an organisation, I'll just go back to universities for a moment, and you have some institutions, at a particular time of the year, I'm thinking of clearing, for instance, they suddenly they need it's predictable fact that they know they're going to need a bunch more channels available. Okay. Then SIP trunking is an ideal way to approach that. And other types of things are people who have particular events. They could be sort of
Ticketing company.
Yeah.
Anyone holding a major event.
Yeah. Wimbledon, for instance.
Yeah.
They know it rains for 52 weeks in a year, and it rains for another 2 weeks, but they get real busy over those 2 weeks or whatever. They need a lot more channels, so that's another example.
Sure. Okay. Great. Is there anything else that I need to consider when I'm thinking about getting rid of my ISDN and moving over to SIP and connecting it to my Lync?
I suppose that we've talked. We made the assumption that Lync, Microsoft Lync as a replacement for PBX, okay, is the end game for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Okay. The reality is that a lot of people will continue to use their PBX for a while. Okay, they're not going to throw it out the day one they get unified comms. People tend to use IM and presence. Okay, and maybe internal communications and a soft client. Okay, and then the little penny drops and thinks, well, we've got this clunky old PBX. We're still, we've got 2 handsets almost. Does that make a lot of sense? Okay.
Yeah.
So from our perspective, there is a migration process, I think, for a lot of people. But to us, we're sort of agnostic in a way because we're still talking to the mediation server, and the mediation server is what can also connect to the legacy PBXs, and that'll just disappear. But the other thing that it's more of a topology thing to be aware of is that you'll see more and more people putting their telephony switches, Lync and non-Lync, actually in data centers. So
yeah, of course.
The question is, if I've got my Lync in hosted, watered, and looked after in a data center, can I still use SIP trunks? Can I still buy them in the same way? And the answer is absolutely yes. We see more and more organizations putting those resources into a data center. For us to connect to them is a relatively trivial exercise, depending on which data center they're in. At Gamma, we're in lots of data centers anyway, as you'd expect, and we have lots of peer relationships, all sorts of the sorts of people that you'd expect to have those relationships with. So either connecting into a rack in a data center somewhere, which happens to be where your Lync lives, is no issue, no problem at all.
Okay. Something that we're asked about a lot. How resilient is this?
It's SIP. How resilient is SIP? How resilient is my packet?
Yeah.
Okay, so there are 2 elements to this. I think one is the resilience of the Gamma network, if you will, once traffic gets to us. And obviously that's going to be pretty resilient because we carry 1 billion minutes of traffic a month. every month. Okay, but what SIP allows us to do is typically a single SIP trunk will go into, we actually terminate SIP in our cloud on SBCs as well, big carrier class SBCs.
Yeah.
Okay. So each SIP trunk goes into a pair, a cluster of SBCs, a high availability pair, and behind that it goes to one of two soft switches that we use for the service. Okay. Now, that's all well and good. If an organisation wants to add extra resilience, particularly in terms of access resilience, what we can do is build two SIP trunks, okay, in what we call an active standby mode. So the first SIP trunk, okay, delivers the traffic in normal business as usual. Okay. If there's an issue with that SIP trunk, okay, either the gateway in a local loop or even the SBCs in our cloud, okay, then we automatically reroute that traffic down the standby link, which terminates actually wherever you like. It could be on the same place, okay, same mediation server. It could be in a different part of your, your company's sort of, site. It could be
could it be a mobile phone, for example?
No. Well, okay, you can do that, but it's not the active standby method. Okay?
Yeah.
The active standby is simply backing up the original active link by standby one. The key thing here is that standby link goes into a separate SPC pair within our cloud, so there's no single point of failure. And the cool thing is it is automatic. We use a number of techniques to decide whether the active link has failed. We can't see it anymore. It doesn't respond to SIP option ping, or we get a response, a particular SIP response called a 503, so you can actually force it to go onto standby if you wanted to from the PBX. So, but that's all automatic. Okay. Within the SIP trunking service, if you wanted to divert individual numbers, individual DDIs, you can do that as well. And you can set up a template, okay, to do that. And if there's an issue, you can actually diverting individual DDIs is more flexible than it sounds, because people have this notion of the world's coming to an end, and I need to simply press a button and divert all my numbers somewhere else. Well, active standby sort of covers it off to a degree, okay, but if you wanted simply to route a DDI range or particular numbers individually, then you would use the network diversion function to do that. It's more of an operational approach than the DR approach. Okay, the active standby is the DR approach.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. No, it makes perfect sense. Okay, so we've covered up a lot, but if I want to talk some more, what next? What next? Who do I talk to? And I suppose I could probably cover some of this off myself, because Gamma, some of you know, are a channel. I think it's fair to say we're a channel-focused organisation. One of our channel partners we happen to own ourselves, so we'd love to talk to you about it. But we're also very happy if you want to source out your local partner, and we'd be happy to help you to find out who that is. Well, you may already be working with them, or they may be someone that's new to you. What we're also going to be able to do is, following this call, is to offer you things like case studies if you were to call us. We're not going to email them out. What we're going to do is we'd like to have a conversation with each and every one of you, and we'll find the most relevant case study for you in your industry, and we'll get something sent out to you. You can see a big free try it now. It's a bit in your face down there. Most deployments that we got on this went out initially in a trial stage. We'd be more than happy to get trials fixed up for anyone. Yes, it says 100% free trial. We'll give you the SIP trunks free for a period of time to get you going. You will have to pay for your calls if you're going to make lots of calls. You're going to have to pay for those, but we'll get it installed, and we're going to get it up and running for nothing for you. So if you want to talk to us, please give us a call on that number. If not, part of these webinars generally, we will follow you up. So we'll be trying to get hold of you probably sometime next week. Hopefully it's not too busy for you in that time leading up to Christmas. So expect our calls. We had a couple of questions during the actual webinar itself, and you've covered most of those off. There were a couple more, which is just about DVIs. and non-geo, as you mentioned, DDIs, that's obviously they will work on there. Non-geographic numbers work in the same way, or?
Yeah, we put that through an email platform and do a translation onto a SIP trunk. So yeah.
Okay, and will it show me as being busy? I mean, Lync is a very big presence thing, so if I'm on the phone, is that going to automatically put me into busy? And I assume it will.
Yeah.
Great. That just leaves me to say thank you very much for joining us. We have recorded the webinar today, and copies will be available to all of you. If you'd like a copy of this, please just ping me an email or give us a call, and we'll get a copy of this sent over to you. So have an enjoyable and relaxing Christmas, and we'll be in touch with all of you very soon.
Many thanks.